So, it's March 2015. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 has just been released, and like the previous two games, people begin to pick through it immediately, finding every little secret and piece of lore the game had from its phone calls and the new minigames. People were going mad with trying to piece these last little puzzle pieces and finally build a timeline for these mysterious games. This was the final game after all, a nice little finale to this trilogy of special little... Where's the hat? Oh no. Yup, it was a lie. April 27th, 2015, the final chapter, Five Nights at Freddy's 4. This game came right out of nowhere, and it immediately set itself apart from the previous three. A macabre Freddy stands before us, bowing his hat towards us, showcasing a major set of claws and teeth. These looked more like monsters than something meant to entertain kids. And sat right at the bottom, a date. Halloween of 2015. 6 months before we could play the next installment. Over the previous few months, a new section of the community was beginning to pick up steam, and by this point had grown into a major part of the FNAF community, the fan game scene. A rabid and devoted portion of the fan base who wanted to make games like FNAF, to either honor the series, ride the popularity, or to just experiment with game development. These games either parodied the games, tried to explore parts of the timeline not covered by the main games, or even create their own stories and characters. When the Nightmare Freddy teaser released in April, the fan game scene took notice, and immediately started making games, usually fitting this new nightmare theme that the teaser seemed to be pointing to. One of these games was called The Last Chapter. The page was created on May 24th, 2015 by Fazbear Factory and Official Alpha. The game was eventually cancelled. Now, courtesy of Sunken, we actually have access to an early access demo of the game. So, why don't we together have a look at The Last Chapter? This game fucking sucks. Now look, this is still an early build of a game that was never released, but even still, the main menu uses the FNAF 4 Nightmare Freddy teaser. We of course have the title, The Last Chapter, and then below that a button prompting us to play the first chapter. A little odd, eh? Pressing play, we load right into the FNAF 2 office, but we can't look left or right, nor do we have access to our flashlight to light up the corridor. We of course have cameras, but they're completely fucking broken. When you turn on the cameras, you'll get a view of the show stage from FNAF 2, and switching to any other camera just shows you a view of Party Room 2, and you can't switch unless you exit the cameras. Now while in the office, we also have this button here marked Wake Up. Hovering over it, we end up in this place. I don't know what this is. It could be a bedroom, a burnt down location, no fucking clue. Being awake, however, means time won't pass, so we of course gotta sleep. Now this is where you'd assume we'd be harassed by the game's enemies, and we kind of are. The enemies in this game just don't do anything, like at all. You have 3 enemies in this game: Phantom Balloon Boy, the Puppet, and Nightmare Freddy. Phantom Balloon Boy and the Puppet will just show up randomly in your office. The Puppet will block the wake up button, but nothing happens for either of them. They don't jump scare you or anything. Now, Freddy is basically the same thing. He'll occasionally appear in the corridor in front of you, and I assume in this instance, this also causes him to appear in the real world, as when you wake up while he's there, he'll just appear on the right side of your screen. But much like BB and the Puppet, he just doesn't do anything. No jump scares in any way. Well, except for making some loud fucking noises. And that's about it. Reach 6 AM and the demo will end. Now look, there are mini games, but they're all completely, utterly fucking broken, so I don't know what they're meant to represent or show, so we're gonna skip them. So yeah, I can see why this was cancelled. So why the hell am I telling you all this? Well, after this game, both Fazbear Factory and Official Alpha all underwent a name change. Official Alpha would become Salvage, and Fazbear Factory would become Blackout 1912. And those two names should sound a lot more familiar, eh? So, after The Last Chapter was cancelled, both Blackout and Salvage worked on some other games that were almost cancelled, but on October 3rd, 2015, the two developers, along with Michael V and Ferguson the Shuffler, would begin to release a few new teasers showcasing a group of rather ominous animatronics that all looked similar to the withered animatronics from FNAF 2, along with a more nightmarish version of Springtrap. Later on that month, on Halloween night 2015, the 4 developers would all finally release their game. And that game was called Insanity. So here we are, the first game in this lineup I'll be properly covering today. Now I'll be covering the anniversary update as that one is the most up to date in terms of story and gameplay, but I'll go over some of the differences between 1.0 and the anniversary update later. Anyway, we open up to a main menu featuring Insanity's version of Freddy, Insane Freddy. The insane animatronics featured in Insanity are all a sort of amalgamation of the withered animatronics from FNAF 2 and the nightmare animatronics from FNAF 4. Featuring heavy withering, sharp claws and teeth, along with the designs of the wizards. They're not great. In 2015 they might have been fine, but they're simple, if kinda boring. The whole game is kinda like this. The rooms are very spartan in detail, usually only containing the bare essentials needed to define what room it is. I can't say it's high quality, but there's a weird charm with these kind of visuals. Same feeling I get with games like The Return to Freddy's 2. Low quality, but with a weird sense of effort. I will say I do like Bonnie's endo head being more of a skull, but that's more pulled from the nightmare endos. But it does somewhat suit the game and its story. Like the visuals, the mechanics of Insanity are incredibly simple. Freddy, Bonnie and Chica will all do the same thing. Go from their show stage all the way to the hall in front of you. Once they're there, you gotta pull up your camera in order to ward them off. Foxy is basically exactly like his FNAF 2 appearance. He'll show up in the hall and then you gotta flash him with the flashlight. Now the balancing factor in all this is your power. Using the flashlight and cameras will drain your battery, and it'll drain it pretty fast. Now the battery will charge, but if you ever hit 0, blackout. You'll be stuck in the dark, and defenseless for a few moments while the power reboots. The next character is Insane Top Hat. Yeah, Freddy's Top Hat is an enemy. Well, the Top Hat is here to keep you using the cameras, as not checking the cameras often enough will result in him completely and utterly disabling the cameras. Then there's Insane Spring Bonnie. He'll be in the safe room in Camp 6, and will randomly teleport to the hallway in front of you. When he's there, you've got to turn the fan off, which I think is a little interesting, if sort of random. He'll leave after a few moments. Now, you shouldn't keep the fan off for too long, otherwise... you'll get killed by Yellow Bear. Yes, he's not called Golden Freddy here. This is a reference to his original FNAF 1 appearance, where his renderer in the office was called Yellow Bear. And those are all the mechanics. And I think it leads to our mostly mediocre and somewhat frustrating gameplay experience. Because most of your antagonists in the nights require power usage, there's heavy RNG in when they appear, with nearly impossible kill timers on the later nights. It's difficult, but not in a way that's any bit fair or fun. And for what? What story do we experience that warrants this? Well, let's cover that. The story in Insanity 2015 changes between the original 1.0 update and the anniversary update released a year later in 2016. In the original game, you played as Fritz Smith, and after searching the parts and services room, you find the bodies of the missing kids and the withered animatronics, and possibly the Spring Bonnie suit. This drives Fritz fucking mad, and he's soon sent to an insane asylum after suffering a heart attack. That's it, really. There isn't any phone calls during the night, and the only other bit of lore you get is at the end of Night 5 with a newspaper article. Completing the game's max mode does let you this scene with the FNAF 4 box, but there isn't really any way to see inside, so it's kinda useless. Now, over the following years, the story did experience some minor changes, but around a year later, and after a dozen or so cancelled games, Salvage released an anniversary update for the game. This update mostly just changed the story of Insanity and added 3 minigames that all connect Insanity to the at the time in development, Dormitabis. These 3 games act like the minigames from FNAF 2, having a chance to appear after death. The first minigame shows Garvey, Dormitabis' version of Purple Guy, standing in front of a corpse. A voice in the background calls out the numbers
1, 9, 8, 2.
After a moment, a ghost rises from the corpse, which reveals this child is the one who becomes the puppet. The second minigame plays out like the Give Gifts minigame from FNAF 2, with the puppet giving gifts, then masks to 4 kids. These are the 4 kids who become part of the BOA, Box of Abominations, from Dormitabis. The final minigame shows how Fritz dies. Garvey walks into the parts and services room, where Fritz is underground, in the Springlock suit. The suit then goes off and kills Fritz. The anniversary update also added phone calls for the main nights, all of whom were voiced by Dada Sushi, the VA for Peter Wright in Dormitabis.
Hello? Hello? Hey, it's me, your training guide.
These calls not only tell you how to deal with the animatronics, but they also give you an idea as to what's going on. You're still Fred Smith, and after seeing something you were meant to see, you were caught and stuffed into a spring-lock suit and put into a crawl space underneath the parts in the service room. The voice on the phone is merely your subconscious, attempting to help you during your various lucid nightmares. The Night 5 news article was also completely changed in the anniversary update.
On the 13th of November, 5 children's corpses were found in a local pizzeria's back room. We currently have an unconfirmed suspicion that this could also relate with the case of the yet-to-be-found Fritz Smith guard that went missing on the 6th of November. We have had multiple suspects in the murder case, but except for one, we have had to freeze them all. The janitor was convicted and is now under arrest, until we can safely say that he didn't kill any of the children or Fritz Smith.
And that's everything to do with Insanity. But of course, like any game that becomes slightly successful, a sequel was immediately put to plans by Blackout. But well, spoiler alert, this was cancelled, along with the next sequel, and the others, and the remasters. I think we should move on. So, what happens after Insanity? Well, like I said, Blackout immediately set to work on a sequel for Insanity, of course called Insanity 2. This game, along with pretty much every other game I'm gonna mention in this video, were all cancelled. Some of these Insanity-related projects did produce some teasers, but not much else. So unless new information is found about these games, consider what I have here to be everything we know about these games. I'll also say that my recounting of these events are likely to be incorrect. If I got something wrong, then don't be afraid to let me know in the comments, and I'll either pin a comment or make a post. Anyway, let's move on. November 2015, Insanity 2 was being developed, and a few teasers were made featuring 3 new characters: Insane Puppet, Insane Balloon Boy, and an original character simply named Insanity. The page for this game was quickly deleted for unknown reasons. In the same month of November 2015, Insanity Reincarnated was announced, and then quickly the page was deleted in December without a single teaser being uploaded. Quickly moving forward to November 22nd, 2015, however, we get something a little more interesting. Blackout announces a free-roam FNAF fan game called Dormitabis. Over the course of the next few months, teaser images would be posted, mostly containing character renders and such. But by January 2016, Blackout announced that this version of the game had to be scrapped, as they were approaching Click Team's limitations. Of course, this would lead to the creation of the Dormitabis we all know, but I've already covered that in a video. And besides, that's in 2018. We're still in late 2015, so let's get back to that now. Going back to November 2015, Insanity 2 Origins would be announced. This one we have a little more information on. The game would be a prequel to Insanity, taking place in Fredbear's family diner and being tied to Dormitabis. The player would need to use a jammer device in order to defend themselves from most of the threats, which include Fredbear, Spring Bonnie, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Dark Fredbear and Dark Springtrap. A lot more teasers were released for this game than most of the other projects, but unfortunately this game was also cancelled. But unlike the others, we did get a rather bare-bones demo released by Salvage on the 23rd of January 2016. It only features one night, most of the renders aren't done, and the only character that can harm you is Fredbear, so yeah, very bare bones. Now fast forward a bit to early 2016, sometime after January and before March. Insanity 2, again, is announced. About 3 teasers were released. The gameplay of this one seems to involve 3 monitors connected to 3 generators, and the player having to disable these generators when the animatronics get close at the cost of not being able to use in certain cameras. The game seems to have an art style inspired by the Return to Freddy's 5 and their torture animatronics. But of course, as is tradition at this point, the game was cancelled quickly after for unknown reasons. Around March of 2016, Insanity 2.0 was announced. This was intended to be a large update to the original Insanity with new animatronic models, new characters,
And it's gone.
Yeah. This game got cancelled. We got some teasers showing some of the new characters, and later on, thanks to the efforts of Sunken, we did manage to get access to a demo of 2.0. And demo is quite the overstatement for what this is, because there is basically nothing here. It uses OG Insanity renders for some of the rooms, most of the new rooms don't even have any renders, and you can't even win or die. So yeah, there's nothing. Around April 2016, Insanity 2 Basement began development. Like the others, we know very little about it. It was going to feature withered toy animatronics and also be tied to Dormitabis. Going by the title and game description, it was likely going to take place in a basement of someone's home, likely a member of the Wright family if this was going to be tied to Dormitabis. Either way, the game was quickly cancelled for, yet again, unknown reasons. This was the final sequel that it attempted. But we're not done yet, as in around late May, early June, a post was made on Insanity's page. announcing the development of Insanity Remastered. This would be followed up by a few teasers featuring some updated insane animatronic models and an updated office and map. Again, this game would be connected to Dormitabis. By the end of summer 2016, this game would be cancelled. And in October of 2016, we would loop right back around to the original Insanity yet again, as on the 30th of October 2016, Salvage released the anniversary update, featuring the new story, minigames, and the phone calls. But that isn't the end of Insanity. November 2016, Blackout announced a complete reboot of Insanity called Crawlspace. This would be co-developed with Subwoofer X3, now known online as Stella Wisps. The insane animatronics were replaced with the Fallen animatronics, each representing some sort of phobia. Fallen Freddy was scopophobia, the fear of being watched. Fallen Bonnie was trypophobia, the fear of small, excessive holes. Fallen Chica was phagophobia, the fear of being swallowed. Fallen Foxy was a chemophobia, the fear of sharp objects. Unfortunately, only Freddy's model was completed and shown as a teaser. We also received a couple of other teasers showing the office and the building layout. But of course, like most everything else seen here, a lack of motivation along with a breakdown in communication between the two developers led to the game being cancelled in February of 2017. And that's it. Insanity was left in the crawlspace to die. Blackout would go on to continue to develop games, release Dormitabis in February 2018, and then leave the internet after being outed around 2020. Insanity would soon be forgotten, a series left as a footnote on random fandom wikis. That is until 2026, when a remaster of Crawlspace would be released. But that's for a later video. And that's Insanity, a messy rabbit hole filled with disappointment and failed games. The original Insanity swings from complete boredom to abject frustration with no in-between, all for a rather simplistic and kinda boring story. But I do think there is something to be glossed from these failed games, and that is that game development is a complicated process, and that you should pick and choose the projects and ideas you work on before presenting them to the world. Otherwise you will end up with a recycling bin full of games and ideas, left to be picked apart by YouTube vultures for cheap views. Oh. I want to thank you all for watching the video. I want to thank the folks on the Insanity Wiki, Dormitabis Wiki, and the BlackoutMediaWiki. Those resources really helped the video, and I'm grateful for them. Have a good evening, folks, and
Good luck leaving the crawl space.